Shit. George, you ready?
Hey,
Kick us
one
off.
question.
Do you know how many times I answer that seriously? George, you ready? It's just like a movie script. I was born ready. I say it every single time.
He's clean,
yes,
man.
I'm ready.
You just went to the barber?
Make me feel good, man. Yes.
You look
Quarantine
about
is over.
10 years
The
younger.
shops are open. The shops are open. I went through security. We made it to security. I came back with a cut. You know, I'm feeling fantastic.
Where's your big brother,
Kingsport.
George? This is
Man,
George
come
Jr.
on, man. Come on, man. This the Instagram filter.
Man, George, you look
man.
10 years younger.
Well, look, man, I feel good. Thank you, man.
Yeah.
All right, cool. See, got the pussycat. You stroking it too, man. Like you just sitting there, you stroking.
Here.
Practice makes perfect, like a motherfucker. God damn. All right, cool. Look, we ready to ride out, man. It's the King's Court. You already know. We got Andrew and Sid back for Maximum Muscle Report. Myself, I am King George, and we have my co-host, Mandus Buckle. Mandus, what up?
George, it's a beautiful day today. We had talked earlier in the year about expanding King's Court to include Classic Physique. We have done that, and here you go. This is the very first full-blown episode of the King's Court, all about Classic Physique. Who better to have on than your other two co-hosts here, Sid and Andrew. What's happening, fellas?
Doing well. Happy to be on again, guys.
Doing good. Thanks for having me.
This will be interesting because we all broke down our top 15, which Kyle will have up when we want to individually talk so you guys can see who we had in our top 15. And we did this of a panel of 6, so you guys out there know how we got down to the final top 10. So this is not what any of us individually thought. It was a collection of the panel of 6, evened out the numbers together, and that's what we came up with. But before we talk about that top 10 list, why don't we talk about this division as a whole? Let's go back to the beginning, the inception of the division. There was a lot of talk about it at first. A lot of people didn't like it. A lot of people thought it needed to be fixed. Like most divisions, when they're new, you have a lot of pushback. A lot of people were not fans of it. I think a lot of people were hung up in the name. Classic Physique, what is Classic Physique? Is it bodybuilding? Is it not bodybuilding? So let's go around and talk about the beginning of the division, who was there at the top in the beginning, and then we'll get to the list that we've broken down for you guys in the second half of the show. So, Sid, why don't you start us with what your thoughts were when this first was announced and started?
Yeah, I'm one of those guys who's actually pretty strongly opposed to the division when it first came out. To me, it seemed like a nerfed version of bodybuilding, you know, where you're imposing even more restrictions and weight class caps and height caps. And for me, I've always been somebody who thought bodybuilding is about building. I've emphasized the building aspect of it. And to restrict athletes to a weight cap like they have in the Classic Physique division just seemed to me a little bit contradictory to the purpose of bodybuilding. But now that the division has progressed and the way it is currently, and they've expanded those weight caps, and they've changed the posing trunks to be a little bit closer to the old school trunks, and they're maybe even adding in new poses, and they've really put an emphasis on condition, I'm a huge fan of the division. The physiques that we see, in my opinion, they're a hybrid of the new standard of bodybuilding with shredded conditioning being valued, but they also still bring back those ideals of beautiful posing and beautiful aesthetic physiques that I think bodybuilding started from and should be emphasized. So I'm a big fan of it now.
Andrew.
I couldn't agree more with what Sid said. Like Sid, when it first came out or when I heard about it, I was kind of skeptical. I was like, is it just, men's physique with maybe just a little more muscle, or men's physique guys hitting bodybuilding poses? But as we started to see the first couple classes, at least at the national level and then the professional level, it's come to become one of my favorite classes by far. The biggest thing for me, I think, is the emphasis on the V-taper. There's a lack of blown out muscle groups. There's a lack of the blown out guts, the stuff that sometimes you see in the larger, open classes, even the 212 classes too. I think the emphasis on that streamlined look brings us back to kind of, brings me back to like the Flex magazines back in like the 1980s, 1970s that I started looking at. So I really do think it's a great throwback division. I like where it's going. Like Sid said, the only thing I don't like is the weight for height restrictions, because to me, classic is something that you see aesthetically. It doesn't necessarily mean like a height versus weight thing. We've just talked about guys a minute ago, and we'll probably discuss them later on, about some guys that are already at their cap limit, but it's like, well, we know they can put on more tissue and they can still maintain that classic aesthetic look that we're all looking for. So I would like to see the IFBB either extend the weight limit for the heights a little bit more, or eliminate it altogether, and come up with some type of written standard versus a height versus waist standard. I don't know if you use, say, like a shoulder to waist ratio or something like that, but to me, I just don't think we should be limited by the weight standards. Okay.
So I know when this came out, even in the group Bodybuilding by Bodybuilders, I was one of the first to defend this division through and through, because I was able to see past year one. A lot of people were complaining the height, the weight restrictions. It's like Sid said, oh, this is a poor man's bodybuilding. Every time a new division has come out in the last 15 to 20 years, for the most part, it's been for the betterment of the sport as a whole. And we all know that each division has evolved. So I was able to look past year one and know, well, like every other division, there's going to be an evolution. And one day I even had predicted, I think we can go back and find it, that I thought that this would one day become the most popular division. Didn't mean that it would be the best division or the biggest payout, just in popularity wise. And so far that's trending in that direction. Now, since the inception of the division, we've seen the weights move up for both the NPC and IFBB. You have to coordinate them. And I think now they'll probably wait a few more years so a larger crop of people can fully develop into the division, because we saw the first 2 or 3 years, we said, well, we're not quite sure where they're going with this. There was some back and forth, but it's turned into what it's supposed to turn into, and what a lot of us knew or thought it would turn into. Don't be fooled by the name. Classic Physique division is bodybuilding. It's bodybuilding with aesthetics in mind. So traditionally in bodybuilding, you could have, weak body parts or bad body parts, or grossly overpowering body parts, big waist, a combination of different things. And in the open classes, you can just outgrow those, if we want to call it genetic defects or whatever we want to call it. Some of it was people who had messed up their training and their nutrition for years, and they kind of screwed up their physiques. You can't do that if you're in classic. You have to either A, be genetically gifted, or B, take the long, slow road to build your physique so you can keep the integrity of your waistline, build shoulder width like the men's physique division has done while keeping the waistline down, things like not blowing up too big in the off season. These are all different attributes that lead to being able to build that physique if you're not just genetically gifted per se. And I think it's a fantastic division. I don't think you can ever put a not have a restriction, because then eventually it will just become close to 212 or bodybuilding. But I do feel that whether it's in another 2 years or 3 years, I'm sure the brass will up the weight limits a few more pounds again. And we all know, we were just talking about before we started, that weight is not as limited as people think. We saw Flex Lewis for years suffer to get down to the 212 division. So even if you're at your weight cap, you can still put on more muscle and come in leaner, harder, drier the next year and still fit in that weight cap. So I think it's a great division. It's one of my favorite divisions. I'd love to see somehow, some way, Andrew, as opposed to non-restrictions in weight and height, I'd love to see something where posing is a little more rewarded. Now, the problem with that is posing is like everything else. You may like one style and somebody else likes another. So it too is subjective. But I think for the most part, we can say, at least early on, we can see a definitive difference from some of the best posers in the league compared to someone who doesn't pose. How they would figure out that would play into the scores, I don't know. So we might be a long way from that if it ever happens. But I'd like to see something like that as maybe a tiebreaker, or if it was valued at a half a point or 1 point, to where a guy could maybe move up one placing. Or if there was a split decision, that would be the tiebreaker, something to that effect. Great division, one of my favorite to watch. I think will continue to be head towards, if not the most popular, one of the most popular divisions in the IFBB and the NPC.
I think you're already seeing that it is becoming one of the more popular, at least at the NPC level. When you go to bodybuilding shows, 10 years ago, there used to be 8 to 10 guys in a bodybuilding class, right? Now we're lucky if there's 3 to 5 guys in a class, but your classic physiques have, your classes there have 10, 12, maybe even 15 at a local show. Yeah. So I think your point is spot on about it growing, becoming, at least at the amateur level, the most popular class for sure.
And Andrew, what I love to see too is on that amateur level is, for the last 10 years, you saw the bodybuilding numbers way down and you saw the men's physique numbers through the roof. Well, now though men's physique numbers are way down, bodybuilding numbers are still down. A lot of those young athletes have gone right to classic, which again, I think the brass hit it dead on the head. This was the most needed division in a long since men's physique and bikini. Whether anybody likes it or not, it made the sport far more popular. It allowed us far more opportunities, and it allowed growth and expansion throughout. Because we all know most athletes start in one division, whether you start in bikini, start in men's physique, start in classic. And as you evolve and as years of training and knowledge and education happen, the majority of those athletes end up going to another division. Nobody knows what they are the first day they walk in, so the evolution of their physique and intellect leads them to other divisions. I think it's the best thing.
Perfect example of that is Stanimal. We started out, me and Stanimal was doing shows, men's physique. So if I'm not mistaken.
And now he said he's going open?
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. So, I think it falls in line with, you got the blueprint with men's physique. It's going to be just like that. It'll continue to be changes. The actual people who are the cream of the crop will start to, show up. And it's a great division. And like you said, when it comes to the progression of, if you are a person like Stanimal, because we can say his name Stan, but you can go from being men's physique all the way to the open. It just gives you certain steps. So people just will continue to find out where they fit in and then work from there. So I like it.
George, I think everyone is curious, and I'll ask for the panel. I'm sure Sid and Andrew, what's kind of the general sentiment within the upper echelon ranks, I guess we would say, of the IFBB and the men's physique division in the last 4 or 5 years here, since Classic has come to fruition, of guys thinking, hey, let me move from men's physique over to Classic. We haven't seen too many success stories, but what's kind of the sentiment and the mind frame of guys saying, hey, is this going to be easy? Is this something I should do? Is this something I can do?
Well, I would say in what 8 years or however long men's physique been around. Ricky
16
Moulton,
was the yeah, men's physique.
Ricky Moulton, Logan, who's just now going, Stanimal. Those are 3 people that I know that left men's physique and actually, you know, have, I can't say Logan yet, but you know, he's on his way. But to change over, it's not how people think. They think if you do good at men's physique that you could just pop over in classic. Like you said, that's bodybuilding. They have completely different body types, completely different muscle, just period. You know, so I might have muscle. I know I do, you know, but they have a different type of muscle. My bicep and Breon's bicep is 2 totally different biceps, you know, so it's not as easy as people think. And when they ask me, are you going, no, I don't want to go over to the bottom and work my way up, because that's exactly what you want to do. You want to go over, just because you can be good at men's physique don't mean you can walk in and just actually go out there and perform. Who knows what your syringe is going to look like top to bottom? It's just, you know, so many different variables that people just don't factor in. And they think just because you get in one area, you know, that you get another. A point guard can't play in the post. If I play in the post, I'm better in the post. You know, I'm not the person that, you know, so it's kind of like that. I'm going to do what I'm good at, which is the reason why when somebody asks me, I'm like, no, because, you know, I'm going to go there and put me up against C-Bone. And I ain't no knock to myself, you know, because I feel high of myself. I'm just saying, you know, think about that. Put him in the front double with that vacuum and then put me over there. I'm a dead man. You know?
Well, we saw year one. 2016 was year one. And we saw Danny Hester win it. We saw Arash, who finished second. We saw Sadiq finish third. Let's fast forward. And let me go ahead and round out then.
I'm sorry about Arash and Sadiq. Those two.
Oh, yeah. And we saw Breon. Breon was fourth and Darren Charles was fifth. That was year one. Fast forward to last year. Chris Bumstead, former open bodybuilder. Breon, former 212, 205, 202, bodybuilder. George Peterson was third, former bodybuilder. Keon Pearson was fourth, former bodybuilder. And Chen Kang. Alex Cabanero was sixth,
12 guy,
former bodybuilder. So it goes back to what I'm saying. Classic Physique is bodybuilding with aesthetics. There are definitively going to be some men's physique guys who, when they put in more time, will have the ability to make that transition. Guys like Logan Franklin, I think we all got to be on the lookout for. He's under 30. He's a hard worker. He's an ex-military guy. He's married with a kid now. Congratulations, Logan. So you want to talk about a guy who's laser sharp focused, you know, and then you've got other guys who we know from the men's physique division, once they make their transition, Chase Savoy, if or when he gets back on stage, Brandon Hendrickson, these guys all have legs, but they need more time. To me, I see the biggest difference as the division evolved and you needed to see legs and back, right? Legs and back, legs and back, legs and back. Well, what are the 2 body parts that take the longest to develop? Legs and back, because you can't do that in 12 months. So I think we're going to see the evolution of this of this division over time. You'll see more men's physique guys be able to transition and be successful. But as we currently see, it's all about bodybuilders going over to Classic and making a name for themselves. Now what will be interesting is to see how many of those new guys that come up right in Classic through the NPC never come from another division and develop. And that, again, will just take time. I think in the next 3, 4, 5 years, we will start to see that crop start to pop up.
I think like when you look at the talent pool for Classic Physique, you have almost at every show 2 guys turning pro in each class, right? But then you also have on the bodybuilding side from the national shows, usually a lot of times you have your light heavyweights, your middleweights, your welters, maybe even a lightweight. They're not going to jump on stage in the 212 or the open. You know, there's very few guys like Justin Randall. He was able to jump from a lightweight and now he would be a top end light heavyweight, you know, and he's
Right.
competitive as a 212 guy. Not everyone's able to put on that kind of muscle. So I think we're seeing just the numbers explode in terms of classic physique pros that are being made every single show.
Yeah, and like George was saying, I think there's room for each of these classes in the sense that there's different body types. Like the men's physique body type doesn't necessarily translate to classic physique, doesn't necessarily translate to bodybuilding. And then for open bodybuilding, you've got these hyper-responsive individuals to food, training, supplementation, diet, and they're more built for that class. So there's a niche for everybody, and that's why I think there's definitely room for this new class, classic physique.
I'm gonna take this to a turn that I originally wasn't ever gonna bring up a conversation like this, but Andrew, you mentioned something a few days ago as we were collectively in our think tank group going back and forth, and my sentiment was the more shows like this we can put out. The brass is now taking the NPC and the IFBB worldwide. We see the evolution of our sport becoming bigger and bigger and bigger, more opportunities for coaches, for athletes, for supplement companies. It's an entire business market. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. And the questions were, will we ever see us back in mainstream? And I don't think we will necessarily ever be back in mainstream because of some of the obvious questions. However, if the evolution continues to happen where classic physique continues to become that popular and becomes, let's say, along with bikini and men's physique, some of the most popular divisions in all of the IFBB, there are other divisions that people really don't question too much, like fitness. We all talked about how we know that they're the best athletes in the IFBB. I mean, are we seeing perhaps in 10, 12, 15 years down the road or more, where classic physique continues to slowly increase? Maybe they're up 8 to 10 pounds from where they are now, and you start to see the mass monsters disappear because the sport is then more acceptable to mainstream America. Is that something that could possibly happen that none of us is imagining today, but is that something that could happen in a decade from now?
I can definitely see your point about as it becomes more mainstream, classic is definitely more of a mainstream look. You know, it's still pretty hard to attain. We all know that.
Right.
But it's a little more attainable than a Ronnie Coleman 290 peeled to glutes type of physique. You know,
and acceptable.
Most people look at that. Yeah, most people look at that and say, "Gross! I don't want to see that."
Right.
But I think the general public can look at the classic physique guys, especially when they're hitting their poses classic, and say, "Wow, that's kind of beautiful." Like maybe I don't necessarily want to look like that, or I don't have the discipline to look like that, but I can appreciate that. Absolutely.
Not to mention, when you see a guy like a Bumstead walking around every day, you go, "Oh, okay, so he's a big guy. I can see he's big, but he looks like an athlete, looks like a football player. Oh, so he manipulates his body to look like that just to get on stage. But other than that, okay." As opposed to what we see if you were to see a Ronnie Coleman walking around, you go, "My God, that is massive. That is inhumane." Is that somewhere that we might end up? Again, I'm not saying this at all. I'm just saying, could we see in 10 to 15 years, all of a sudden, the NPC and the IFBB become televised once again, are all of a sudden a whole nother era ushered in? I guess we just have to see.
I think we're already kind of moving that way. I mean, you have people like big promoters like The Rock, you know, who's getting involved in bodybuilding, you know. I mean, he's got an event called the Athleticon, which it's been canceled for this year because of the virus, but it's scheduled for next year. And there's some big names, some big promoters, some big advertisers. He's bringing some big money into the sport. So yeah, along with your point, yeah, it's kind of moving to a mainstream on TV household type, direction.
Could shows like the Athleticon start to give us some of the data and information we need for mainstream America? Oh, let's say Athleticon happens for 3 or 4 years in a row. And with all the other events they have going on, you all of a sudden see droves of positive feedback coming towards the sport of bodybuilding, where there's masses of people who all of a sudden love the bikini division, the fitness division, classic physique division, men's physique division, and they start studying that data, which obviously the office is always going to do. It's a business. Could that be the opening of the door even more so, like you said, with an Athleticon in Iraq, who is going to show regular America, hey, look, this is actually going on. Maybe you don't like this division, but you like that division. Could that feedback be the beginning of the information of where we're headed? I don't know.
Absolutely. I mean, I think there's always going to be freaks. There's always going to be
right
super heavyweight, top of the echelon freaks. I think that's never going to go away. Maybe the interest in it will slightly decline over the years as more of this mainstream, more of a classic, type division. And I'm thinking of the bikini, the figure, cleaner looks. We'll call them cleaner looks in a sense.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. That are just more aesthetical, more marketable. I mean, let's be honest, the NPC, the IFBB, Jim Mannion, all these guys, they're no dummies. They don't bring out divisions that are going to flop. I mean, every time they bring out a new division, we all sit here like, I wonder what's going to happen. And next thing you know, it becomes the biggest division for the next 2 to 3 years until they bring out another division. We've been having this talk over the last year or so about wellness coming to the stage. And people are like, oh, it's just going to be, bikini girls that don't fit the great bikini mold. It's like, well, especially the girls from South American countries, it gives them a place to really shine. So I think that, just talking about the divisions, that's going to be another area that's going to just explode in terms of popularity within our sport.
Are those closed-minded people, Andrew? Again, a lot of those people are the same. Sid, you were guilty of it with Classic. I was on the boards speaking up about wellness. Look, we're now global. We're not only in the United States anymore. It's not only the South American countries. If you look over the last 10 years, if we look at the last 10 years, and you went into almost any gym across America, what body part is the majority of women working on?
Glutes.
What is it?
Lower body.
Glutes, legs,
body.
glutes, legs.
Yeah.
For 10 years already, that's in America. Now we're talking about all of South America. You're talking about Africa. You're talking about a lot of other countries where that's not only a shape that they prefer, but that's also their genetic predisposition. So the brass is thinking of not only what's popular in the United States, but what's globally popular. So to not be open-minded enough to see that something is going to grow and evolve to be much bigger is the difference between someone who opens up a corner shop and always stays a corner shop, as opposed to that business owner who opens a corner shop and eventually turned it into a Jewel or a Kroger that was franchised all over the country. The only difference between those two people is one guy figured out how to scale up. It's the only difference. I think I don't think the people that are in the sport recognize Jim Mannion for the genius he is. I don't think there's enough people who are every day in our sport who truly realize the absolute genius of this man and the family legacy that continues. Because, guys, do we remember? I mean, most of us weren't there, but we have history. We all personally know people 30, 40 years ago. Shows were done in gymnasiums under a basketball hoop with a light shining down, and people coming through. That's right.
Yours too, probably.
Mine absolutely was. I had no idea where I was or what I was doing or what was going on. and I enjoyed every second of it. And now we're talking about, you just mentioned The Rock and Athleticon. That's how far we've come. We are now global, as opposed to in I think it was in a few states in the beginning, right? New York, New Jersey, Pittsburgh. It was just a couple of places, California. It wasn't all over. And look at where we've gone. I don't think there's a limit to where this might go. And I think Classic Physique is going to be a huge part of the future of the sport.
Yeah, it already is. So let's get into this list.
Yes. Let's get into the list. Well, we know who's number one. It's the current Mr. Olympia. From Canada, none other than Chris Bumstead. What do we think?
Very deserving. I think when you think of the word Classic Physique, his face and his physique comes to mind. His posing's good. I think it can still get a little bit better. I think as he continues to develop, he's going to start working the aesthetics of his posing a little bit more. We've seen that, develop from when he turned pro at North Americans as a super heavyweight to, winning the Olympia this last year. I'm not sure how many pounds he has left between his cutoff or how much he has to cut. But I think his physique is pretty complete top to bottom right now. He was my pick definitely this last year.
Yeah, I agree. I think Chris is pretty solidly set in that number one spot. I think when you look at him, he screams classic, just like Andrew said, but there are still some spots that are weaknesses. If you look at his backside, just genetically, it's not put together as well as other people, maybe like Breon. His arms were lacking quite a bit more at the beginning of his professional career, but he's caught them up quite a bit, specifically the biceps. And then there's also an opening for him to be dethroned in the fact that he does have some health issues that have been pretty well documented. He has an autoimmune issue, which has previously affected him during his prep. And so if he can keep that under control during his prep, I think he's on a lock for that first place spot at the Olympia, but there's definitely some unknowns still.
In the number 2 hole, we got Breon. George.
Breon is my guy, man. I didn't know him as well as I know him right now. I know he's an ultimate competitor. He keeps positive energy, and I know he wants to reclaim his title. I don't have the eye that you guys have, but I feel like he was on, and I think him and Chris comparison is apples and oranges, because if they both stand alone, they have two completely different looks. And so, he didn't get it, but for me, knowing him, he's heavy legs, George, heavy legs, he's fly, and he has everything. He's a great poser. He poses with his eyes closed, He's an ultimate competitor, so it's going to be, interesting, because Chris is, he's Mr. Olympia for a reason, but I will watch out for Breon, because I know he's just, he's a competitor, and he's coming, to try to get his title back.
We got in a 3-hole, Terrence Ruffin. Terrence is young. Terrence, I apologize. I don't remember. We couldn't remember if you were 26 or 28. So, young man. Now, interestingly enough, though, Terrence Ruffin was at the very first Classic Physique Olympia. So, he's not new to the big stages, the Arnold stages, the Olympia stages. Even though he's young, he's a veteran of the game. He's got great support system. He's got one of the better coaches currently in the game in his corner. I think Terrence is going to be a lot of trouble for quite a few years. And to me, Terrence is not only the best poser in all of the IFBB, because he's the best poser and he has such an amazing physique. To be ranked top 3 in any division means you're one of the greatest in the world. I think he's one of the 3 most entertaining athletes in all of the IFBB. I have Whitney Jones as the most entertaining. That's just a personal preference because of all the things that they do. And I personally love to watch Sergio Oliva Jr. to be able to bring the showmanship and the posing he does at his size. But man, when Terrence Ruffin's going to be at a show and on stage, I don't want to miss that. I want to be in my seat and glued to the stage with my phone down, because I want to watch the entertainment that's about to happen on stage. And I get that from Terrence Ruffin every time.
I agree 100%. I probably have gone on YouTube and looked up Terrence's routines from like his first shows up to now. Like I probably watched them all at least 4 or 5 times, especially like that Toronto Pro Survivor routine he did. Unbelievable, you know. There's definitely no better showman in the sport than Terrence.
Yeah. Hey, might we be able to coordinate? Hey, Terrence, can you and Whitney Jones put something to? I don't know what it would be, but can you and Whitney Jones put something together so we can all be entertained over and over and over again? I can't imagine what they could do, but the two of them, could you imagine? Wow. In the 4-hole, we got Steve Loris. We just saw him at the Arnold this past March. Andrew, what do we think about Steve?
I thought Steve kind of took a little bit of a step back this year. And that's not just because of his placings. I just didn't think he had the same crispness that he did the previous year, the Olympia in particular, or Arnold. I can't remember which one. But, you know.
Arnold, because he wasn't at the Olympia.
That's right. Okay,
right. Yeah.
But either way, I mean, the opportunity, because Steve's also a young guy. You know, his original coach, Justin, showed me his pictures before he even ever stepped on stage. And the potential in this guy, just hitting a front double, you're like, that guy's going to be a pro within like a year or two. And he's classic to a T.
Yeah.
So absolutely, I think, you know, he just needs to refine some things. I think he's working with Neil Hill still, I believe.
Yeah.
I think they just got to get on the same page, refine some things, and just bring in a lights out package in terms of dryness, conditioning. His posing's already very good for most part, you know. But I just think he needs to hone it in just a little bit, just work on those finer detail things, and he could definitely move up in placings.
Sid?
Yeah, I gotta agree on Steve. The knock on him has just been his conditioning. But when I see him, I see a 2020 version of Brian Buchanan. Just that taper that he has, it's unmatched in the IFBB. And he has like, the physique is complete. The issue is just peaking it properly, I think. So we'll see how he does with the Olympia.
I would like to see, when you talk about, if you were to have a clay model of somebody that you said was classic physique to a T, I don't think you could sketch somebody better than Steve Loris. I know he needs to sharpen up a little bit, but I'd like to he still needs to add some upstairs. He needs more back. He needs more thickness in that upper body to fill out that frame. As much as we say he's ideal for classic, are we perhaps looking at somebody who at his best eventually has to go to the Open? For his best, not saying he can't be I agree that he can be a classic physique Mr. Olympia. Are we saying that you can't be a top 5 classic physique guy and then one day eventually move to the Open? Because I think he might be a guy who would look even better
if he could
at
put on
an
20.
even higher weight, which would mean down the road. Because we remember back in the day, right? Wasn't this always a conversation of guys like Flex Wheeler, and although they would sometimes come in leaner and more aesthetic and sometimes bigger, everyone's physique has a size that they ultimately look the best at.
That's true.
And so is he a guy who we might see possibly one day win a men's physique Mr. Olympia and possibly years down the road switch over to Open and become a top 5 or top 10 Open bodybuilder too? I think it'll be interesting. I think he needs to put on more size.
We did see him get on stage as a 212 at the New York Pro
too tall.
2018, and he looked lanky next to those guys.
Right.
So he needs to put on 20, 25 if he's going to stand next to the open guys.
Right. Well,
if he can do that with that
30.
shape,
He's under
I
30,
think
isn't he?
I think
Yeah,
he
he's
just
on the
needs
same-
to. He's got a top physique where he is. I think he just needs to nail it. That's it.
Yeah, I mean,
It's right there
I go
in his
back to
face.
that.
Just nail it.
Yeah.
Just
I think
nail it.
if he
Because
brings
when he
lights out
nails it,
conditioning,
he's hard to beat when he nails it. So like, well, I don't go looking for something that's already there. I just perfect it. That's it.
I'm not talking about right now. My question, really, my statement is about, is he a guy who potentially will look better at 25? I'm not saying he's not a great classic guy now. Is
I don't know.
he
I
one
can't
of
say
the
that.
few that will look really good at his weight right now and then really good 5 pounds bigger, which I believe he needs? Is he a guy who potentially will look even better at 25 pounds bigger because of the frame? That's my question.
remains to be seen, I guess.
Right. And
You
if
know
you're
what I mean?
under
And
30, after 4 or 5 more years of training, what is he going to do?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
he's quite
it's
a bit.
bodybuilding, so.
Yeah, he's quite a bit under his classic physique limit as of yet.
Is he still that far under?
Yeah.
I thought he was like
Yeah.
9 or 7 pounds. I
Oh,
think.
wow.
So he's got a lot to grow still in classic
Okay.
physique. And then just going to open bodybuilding, you know how tough it is to just eat that much and lift that heavy. You know, it's a whole different
Not everyone
ballgame
wants to do
than,
that.
like making smaller gains for the other classes. So if he has that kind of willpower, sure. I mean, I think he'll look fantastic, bigger. I mean, most people, in my opinion, you could say that about a lot of these classic physique guys. They look even better if they were bigger, but can they do it? That's the question, right?
I don't know if everyone has that type of frame, though. I mean, if we took a guy like Ruffin, I mean, I could never see Ruffin. He doesn't have the frame to be able to fill out to go to it. You could see a guy like Bumstead, you know, hey, pack on another 25 pounds. That's all. Frame-wise,
Yeah.
I believe Loris and Bumstead are the type.
Yeah, he definitely has the frame. He absolutely has the frame.
Yeah. So in a number 5 hole, savvy old veteran still hanging on, Alex Caballero, man. He just came off of an Arnold win. So I would have to say, if I'm Alex and I'm Alex's camp, I would say to King's Court in this show, why do you have me 5th? I just won the Arnold.
Because he wasn't against the best.
Yep.
He wasn't against Chris, you know. He wasn't against Breon. I think that right there. You know.
So how did he finish below Steve Loris when Steve Loris actually finished below him at the Arnold?
Well, Steve Loris was off at the Arnold.
So we're cutting Steve some slack from what we've seen Steve bring before and the potential of what we know Steve's physique can bring. But I think we all believe maybe Alex has tapped out his potential. Is that a good way to say it? Like, can Alex get bigger?
Yeah.
Can he get any better though? You know.
Alex is north of 40, correct?
Can you get down, definitely.
And he came in peeled.
Yeah.
It wasn't like he had, you know, areas where he needed to trim a few off. Like, he was already peeled to the bone. It was a deserving win, absolutely.
Oh, he looked lights out. Are we maybe looking at? Does he remind you of Danny Hester when Danny Hester first won? And so, are we looking at a guy who has a very complete physique, top to bottom, front to back, left to right, very balanced, dry, hard, conditioned, full. So he's a complete version of his physique. Are we looking at a guy who years ago when Classic was first out could have won, but because the division has evolved and we've seen some of these other guys like Bumstead and Steve Loris, when they nail it, they're just simply a little bit better than him? Is that what we're looking at?
I think
no knock on Alex. I mean, he's doing looks phenomenal.
No, I think you nailed it there. Like, I would agree with that statement 100%.
Number 6.
Five on the list ain't bad.
5, 5, 5th
That's
best in the world.
Look at the people in front of you that we're talking about. So
yeah,
he's sitting right there.
Absolutely. This is a guy who gets slighted and doesn't get talked about very often. And if he continues to improve the way he has the last few years, we could all be eating crow here. Danny Union is now is in a 6 hole. And year after year, nobody puts him in the top 5. And year after year, he qualifies for the Olympia, and he finishes 6th, 7th, year after year.
I think we have him appropriately because he is consistently a 6'7". He does qualify for the Olympia every year. He does continue to improve, but he's just going to have to be improved that much more and be lights out to knock off a guy like Alex or, you know, to move up on Steve or to be able to stand next to Terrence Ruffin. I mean, not a knock on his physique at all. He's one of my favorite Classic Physique pros, you know, just, you know, to look at. But I think we have him placed appropriately. 6 is no knock, you know, 6 in the world. That's pretty good, and especially when we're talking about the company that he's keeping. So,
right,
you know, you just got to keep doing what he's doing. You know, I think.
Sid, what do you see when you look at Danny Union's physique?
That's classic to me, man. He can hit that vacuum. He's got these nice full round muscle bellies, former bodybuilder, so he still has all that thick muscle that he brought with that class when he sucked down a little bit to make the Classic. I think that just genetically, I don't know if he can stack up with those top 3, top 4, top 5 guys. You know, I think where we have him is pretty fair.
Yeah, and I know every time we talk to Danny, it's one of the things he asks, hey, you know, no one ever, I don't get much respect. I don't get much. He doesn't get upset, but you can see it's a chip on his shoulder, and he uses it as motivation. So I'm always anxious to see him at his next show because he brings it without bringing all the extra hype and hoopla. He just goes to work, shows up, does his thing. Kindly,
you almost forget that he's in the show, and then like he shows up on stage, you're like, oh, Danny's in the show. He's gonna be top 5, or he might be. He might even win the damn thing. You know.
Yeah. You know, I thought it was one of the better endings to a show this past year out in California, the Long Beach show, the Legion, when it was Arash and Danny Union, and they had them pose for pose for pose for pose, and boy, you know, there is nothing better than seeing great competition. That's what we love in sports, and I could watch that over and over and over again. So, Danny, you know, you're on this list. I'm sure you'll be upset at where you're at, but here you are again in that 6th spot. 7, Kang. Sid, take it away.
Man, this is a guy goes by branch for a reason. You know, those legs are something else. You don't see those a whole lot. They're ridiculous. I think last year was his first year at the Olympia. He placed 5th.
4th.
And
5th,
4th?
yeah, sorry. 5th, yeah. Keon was 4th, Kang was 5th, yeah.
And it was interesting with him. He had some visa issues, I believe, prior to the show. And so he was a little stressed out. And so I think that might have impacted his look. The thing with him is I think there's a lot of upside to his body, but he needs to come in a little bit tighter, and his backside is lagging a little bit compared to how good he is from the front. He could use a little more upper body development from the back.
Sid, you killed that one.
Yeah, hey, Sid, we can't follow up with you there. You
hit all the points.
You did. Ding, ding, ding. You got all the points. On to number 8. Number 8, we actually had a tie here. Ricky Moten and Logan Abner were equal at 40 points, but Logan Abner had more guys place him higher than Ricky Moten. So based on that, we have Abner listed above Ricky. So Abner's in the 8 hole. What are we seeing there?
I think we have it placed appropriately because, you know, Abner's beaten Ricky by 1 place at, you know, both the Tampa Pro where Abner was 1st and Ricky was 2nd, and then at this recent Arnold. So I think, you know, we have that placing figured out properly. Now with Abner physique wise, to me, he's like, it just screams classic bodybuilder to me, you know. He's got a great bodybuilder's frame, but he's kept the waist small. He's kept, you know, he's added some size to his quads, which used to be a slight weakness. He's learning how to pose better. And I think, you know, and he works with Justin Randall, who's really good at coaching him. I think with him, it's just a matter of focus and being a bodybuilder year round. I know he gets really focused before a show and maybe takes a little bit of time off, you know, in the off season. I think if he can really focus straight through, he's going to be moving up into that 6, maybe 5 spot in the near future.
Is this we people talk about how hard professional sports are, and then you have some people say, "Oh, bodybuilding isn't a real sport." Is this possibly the proof or giving people an example that to be an elite level bodybuilder is actually harder and more demanding than other sports? Now, before all those critics jump on me, to be an elite level basketball player or baseball player, you have to have more genetic gifts, as in hand-eye coordination. You have to hone in those hand-eye coordination skills for decades and decades before you can become elite. Obviously in basketball, not as long as in baseball, based on how great your genetics are. But is this then showing that, hey, no matter how elite of an athlete you are, you have to dedicate all year round to become elite? You know, in most other sports we see they have an off-season training program. That's tough for the average person, but would be a walk in the park to us as far as food commitments, sleep commitments, training commitments, all of those things year round. Because look, he was in the NFL for a few years, wasn't he? You're talking about one of the best athletes in the world. But where was that, Andrew?
He played for the Bills for 2 seasons.
So
had a good college career at Maryland.
Yeah, I mean, so are we maybe looking at a guy who's a world-class athlete? You know, obviously if you make it in the NFL, or I guess it's fair to say you're a world-class athlete. What, 1% of the population less than 1% can do that?
Like maybe 1% of 1%. You know?
Right, yeah. So 0.303. And now you come to another sport and you say, hey, I'm a competitor, I'm an athlete, I want to crush this. And maybe he's realizing like, whoa, you mean it's not during the season and then I have a nice little off-season protocol, but I can go ahead and screw around a little more often than I want to, like most other athletes do in other sports? Are we seeing that? George, give us a little insight. You've been an upper echelon IFBB pro now for 8-9 years, whatever it's been. What does it really take, not just to be a pro in the IFBB, but to be an upper echelon pro, the type of commitment and dedication year round? Give us a little insight on that.
I had to learn that. You know, I've had friends when I first started out, you know, everybody can do a show and you locked in for that show, you know, and then there's another show after that, you know, and you got to be the same way. And I learned each show, your mentality and what's going on in your life is different, you know. And so as you get whatever recipe for your off season or whatever, you got to put all of that together with life. So balance is everything. And I've learned how to balance food in the off season, decision making as far as each day, you know, with talks that me and you have, each day you're working towards a goal that may be a year from now, you know, but that you have to work right now. Whereas, like you said, in another sport, because I play sports too, I'm an athlete. And so where sports, I could go do whatever I want to in the summer. And then when training camp comes, I need just that camp and I'm in shape and then I'm getting in my groove and then that's just it, you know, whereas now, man, I've been eating for a show in December since, you know, March. You know, there's a gradual plan, you know. So if you realize that, like I have, well, now going back into prep, because I'm going into prep right now, man, I'm out in the front. So there's no stress. It's like, you know, I can continue to cross the T's and dot the I's. And that's just, it just comes along with experience. And that's how you sustain. Because you can get to the top. You can be locked in, loaded, and go knock your goal out, and then boom, you got it. And then what? You know what I mean? You got to deal with other people that are up and coming. So I surround myself by the people that's like I was back when I ain't had nothing, because that's when I was a killer, you know. And so to keep that mentality, I always tap back into that.
Number 9, we got Ricky Moten. I think this is a guy who, if not this year, very soon will be a perennial top 5 Olympian. I think he's got all the tools. He's got the work ethic. He's got his head on straight. There's no distractions. He's a family guy. So I think a lot of these things play a big part in it when you're, like we just talked about, because this sport is all year round, and it's not all year round for 1 year. It's all year round, year after year after year after year. It's hard to sustain that if your personal life is a young single guy or somebody who's easily and I'm not saying that young single guys can't do it, but it's harder. You're a young single guy, or you're easily distracted, or you're maybe a little bit lazy or not as motivated. That makes it almost impossible to say you can stay focused for 12 months, 4, 5, 6 years in a row. That takes a heavy toll. So when I see a guy who is cool, calm, collect, has a good physique, has a good work ethic, and has everything at home kind of just in order, I think the chances of them being that much better are that much greater, because there are zero distractions and the support system is there. So I'm a huge fan of Ricky Moten, and I believe we're going to see big things to come from him for years to be.
Yeah, this kid has muscle bellies like you wouldn't believe, top to bottom, and now that he's gotten with some good guidance, I think he's with Dorian Hamilton now.
Yep.
I want to say. I think you're going to see him come in just tighter and better and with a more professional protocol than he's previously had. I'm excited for his future.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's a guy that started out in men's physique and moved to classic.
Yeah.
He told me that when we interviewed him. I didn't even know.
Yeah, I didn't know that either. I
didn't know till one of my clients told me about it. And I had to go back and look up on NPC News to see him in the classic physique,
right
men's
He's
physique.
there. Yes, he is.
It's just funny because his legs are his best body part. He said, "Why were you hiding those things under the shoulders?" Yeah, yeah. And 10th, last but obviously not least, another Canadian, Henry Pierre. So the first guy on the list is from Canada. The last guy on the list is from Canada, Henry Pierre. Now, Henry Pierre, another guy who actually was competing as an open bodybuilder in the IFBB, and was first call-outs, and I believe top 5 at 1 or 2 shows. So he had a future there, and decided he wanted to shift gears down, size-wise, food-wise, and going to classic. He did really well, and then we didn't see anything from him last year. But he finished 4th in 2018, and then last year things didn't work so well for him. But he's still on our top 10 list here.
I think that just speaks to the potential that we saw when he was on stage. That 4th. Yeah, that 2018 year everyone was talking about him, being a top 5 guy. I think he kind of left us hanging by not doing anything in 2019. I think we were all kind of waiting.
Olympia in 2019. He just got 14th.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Then I think it was just kind of weird, right? Like, because we were expecting, the next step.
That happens though. That happens.
Absolutely.
That's when you got to find that that's what I'm saying. You can be an elevator. You got to find consistency.
But it didn't seem like it was one of those issues.
Yeah.
It didn't seem like it was one of those issues where like him and coach just like missed the protocol or missed the peak. You know what I mean? It just seemed like something. No,
it could have been anything, and that does not mean that. All I know is the way that he looked is how he can look, and some people can't look like that. So we know he can get back to that. It just may have been, Lord knows, and it happens. I've been in different spaces, and look at some of my shows. It shows you where your head is. I'm in a great space right now. Look what happens when you're in a great space.
Well, in all sports, isn't the number one thing you look for in an athlete? I guess in all jobs, but we're talking about sports here, is consistency. If you can be great once, why are you not there again is the question. And then when we see someone who's consistently great, now we start to look at that person in a whole new light, because it's no longer oh my God, wow, they were in the top 5 at the Olympia. It becomes, well, he's supposed to be in the top 5 of the Olympia. He's that good. So we obviously haven't gotten to that point yet from him. But as George said, what is he, a one-hit wonder? Is he not? This year will tell, because if he doesn't have a good season this year, you're 2 years removed. You're yesterday's news, aren't you?
Yeah, there's a big question mark for me with Henry. He's one of those guys who just blows up post show. He'll pack on 30, 40 pounds and that stresses out your body. It's hard for you to come back and make that weight when you're rebounding, going all over the place like that, So I think it's yet to be seen whether he can keep that discipline that he needs in order to be a force in Classic Physique. But when he's on, you can't dispute it. Your eyes go to him in that lineup because he's just so big and so aesthetic. In that lineup, he just stands out like no other.
So let's talk for a minute. We've gone through the top 10 list, and let's talk about the difference that we see now. The first guy on this list, the fourth guy on this list, and the 10th guy on this list are really big. They're tall, they're wide, they have massive, massive frames. We look at the second guy on the list, the third guy on the list, the fifth guy on the list, the seventh guy on the list. They don't have these big, huge, massive frames. Are we starting to see, as a matter of fact, another huge frame, Logan Abner. So number 1, number 4, number 8, number 10 on the list. Are we starting to see the ushering in of the big man where traditionally in the sport of bodybuilding, once you start to hit a certain height, you can kiss a career goodbye in the IFBB. How many guys were 6 foot or above that really had any relevance on the IFBB stage? So now is Classic Physique giving a platform for these bigger guys? And does that mean it will become a big man's show? Are we going to see, but why do we see so many shorter guys that are still near the top? Because they can fill out their frame. How do we differentiate, and what does this mean going forward? What are we looking at?
Well, we already had that last year. You got Breon and Chris.
Right.
Yeah, Chris.
But what I'm saying is now you see 4 out of our top 10 are guys who, in the past, their careers would have been over, right? You're talking about 6 foot and above, pretty much. 5'11", 6 foot and above. There's been very few guys who have had successful careers that were
I think guys evolve, and they maybe because it's been like that, right? Bigger guys are like, man, shit, I ain't about to just keep sitting on the sideline. So they evolve and they fit the criteria for their body with the style that you're looking for. It's like anything else, you're gonna evolve. So
well, I think like when you look at a lineup, right, your eyes automatically go to what's the biggest thing on stage. You know what I mean? Like, all things being equal, conditioning, dryness, all that good stuff, all being the same, a larger, more heavily structured athlete just kind of looks more impressive, Right. So, yeah, and I kind of see what you're saying with that point of like, maybe is it really create an avenue for, say, top or taller bodybuilders that would not hack it, that they can't get to 260 on stage, can't get to 280 on stage in an open class, but they can hit the 230, 235, whatever cutoff at 6 foot, 6'2", and still look massive next to a 5'7" or 5'8" athlete. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think given the weight to height restrictions, the hope is that they have a similar level of musculature between each athlete.
Right.
And so, like Andrew says, when you have that 6'2" guy who's got the same even development as the 5'6" guy, big man's gonna win, no doubt about it.
That's a CL 600 bench next to a 320. Taking the big bends every trip, Like it works out because we don't really know what really goes into it. It's posing. It's a panel of judges too. So it's who likes what. It's who's really like performing that day. We're just giving our opinions. So I don't really know. It's just on that day, whatever combination, they'll pick a person, and then that's what we roll with.
You can't deny that. Like, I'll go ahead.
Go ahead, Andrew.
Well, I was just gonna say you can't deny that, like a Chris or a Henry or even like a John Hambrick, out in a lineup, the height, and like Sid said, with the muscle density being pretty equal because of the weight restrictions, it just they overshadow the smaller, shorter athletes.
It's pretty.
Yeah,
it's pretty to look at. you've got a large structure that's aesthetic, shoulders this wide, waist comes in here, quad sweeps that bubble back out. Usually the knock on the athletes was either there wasn't symmetry and balance, the top was too long, the bottom was too long, too short, or they couldn't fill in those gaps. So now that we're seeing a larger frame athlete keeping the integrity of the waist, being able to fill in the gaps, it's aesthetically pleasing to look at. So
Absolutely.
It'll be interesting to continue to watch the evolution of this division. Let's go around and each name one or two guys that you think you might say are on your list to look out for that didn't make the top 10, that you think, hey, look out for this guy at the Olympia.
Well, I'd just like to say shout out to Danny Hester. That's my guy. Danny, what up? Danny, you know you're a ninja. Danny's a ninja. Danny will disappear on you. I'm telling you. You gotta watch Danny. I'm gonna tell a story real quick. We in the hotel. I see Danny. We supposed to be going somewhere. Danny walks by with, Danny be wearing a little, satchels or whatever. So he's got the satchel, and I guess he think we don't see him, and he's walking with the satchel like this. And I'm like, Danny, I see you. What are you doing? And he didn't show. Let's just say he didn't show up. So I guess he thought so. That's why I call him the ninja. He dropped the little thing and poof, and then he's just gone. Jonathan Hambrick, I like his style. He helped us coming. And then my man Logan Franklin, man, he ain't playing no games. He coming for everything. So that's my theory. I
definitely agree with Jonathan Hambrick. I think, just like I said, the size is just the height, I think that's just too impressive. He was the Junior USA's overall champion in 2018. I remember watching that and just being like, wow, this guy's nuts. I think as he continues to develop, we're going to see him crack in the top 10 probably this year. I know his coach, Chris Aceto, has said that his promise that he's going to make the Olympia. Who knows?
Who said that?
Aceto.
Who's that?
Chris Aceto.
Is he on a Mount Rushmore?
He is on the Mount Rushmore.
Oh,
he knows what he's talking about.
Okay.
100%. The other guy who I'm really high on is Courage Opera. I just really like his shape, his look. I think he could tighten up his conditioning a little bit, and he also has a few more pounds I think he can add before he caps out at the weight limit. But he's had 2 third places at the Arnold Classics over the past couple of years, so he's definitely someone to be watching.
I'm with George. I think Logan Franklin is a guy to look out for. He's under 30. Again, his personal life is very well put together, very structured. He's not a party guy. He just had a baby. Congratulations, Logan. He fell in love with a beautiful woman who now gave him a kid. They got a house. They got a pool. He's got everything set at home to be 100% focused. And he already was a hardworking guy, a military guy. And I think Logan likes to keep it simple. He's a simple guy, and he likes to keep things simple, Find me a gym, give me food, let me train. And then he wants to win, so he's going to show up ready to battle. He doesn't care who else is on stage, and you need that kind of confidence to be on those big stages. He doesn't care who else is there. And I'm going to give a little bit of a shameless plug. When you talk about a true guy out of the woodwork, this guy hasn't even competed yet on a pro stage, and I'm going to say look out for him. I think it's fun that way. Everyone else we've mentioned we know is DeAndre Campbell. Now, this guy won the light heavyweights in bodybuilding a few years ago at North Americans.
It was right after he won the heavyweight class at Universe, too.
Correct.
A month before that. And I thought he should have won the overall at that. I was in the stands. I thought anyway.
Yeah, and if you remember the score sheets from North Americans, Seth Shaw barely edged him out at North Americans. Hasn't competed since, but has been training. He's another military guy, married, very strong faith, church, God-fearing guy. So certain things restrict the amount of competing he can do. But he is committed, and I'm even going to say what shows he's committed to: the Tampa Pro and the New York Pro. He decided, I want to do the hardest and the best shows I can. I've been waiting for my opportunity. I think he's a guy not only you're going to see at the Olympia, I think he's going to make some noise at the Olympia, not top 5 or anything, but I think you're going to see a guy where people go, who? Wait, who? What, does anyone know this guy? And so I think that'll be fun and encouraging to see for up-and-coming athletes that you can not have competed and qualify for the Olympia in your first year. And then I'm with you guys on Hambrick. I not only has he got a great physique and great structure, but a nice guy, man. What is he, 20, 23?
He's young, man.
Yeah.
He's young.
And, yeah, he's,
man
like
child.
you said, he's with Aceto. So we know he's learning all the right things to do, what not to do, the work ethic. So we know he'll be ready this year. So I'm excited to see that group.
I've just got to co-sign all the guys you guys said, which just goes to talk about how good the Classic Physique division is. You have so many names that you can be excited about and their potential. For me personally, 2 names that pop out to me. First one is Rylan McDougal, who's a previous Pro Show winner. I believe he won the Vancouver Pro back in 2019 or 2018. He was one of Matt Porter's clients. He did the Olympia last year and was DNP. But this guy's got all the potential in the world. Fantastic structure. I think he prepped himself for the Olympia last year, which might be why he came in off. But if he gets with the right direction, I think he's going to be one of those guys who can break into the top 10 in the Olympia. Second guy for me is your 2018 Classic Physique overall winner at the USA's, Brian Jones. Brian Jones is actually a local guy to me. I don't know how familiar you guys are with him, but he's done 2 pro shows in 2018 and 2019, placed top 3 or top 4 in both of them. But the potential on this kid is absolutely unreal. Unbelievable structure, unbelievable muscle bellies, top to bottom. His issue thus far has been his conditioning and his posing. He hasn't had the best guidance up until now, but he's left his previous coach and he hasn't gotten with the coach just yet. Hoping to get him with Andrew Vu, my coach, not just because I'm biased, but I think that would be the best situation for him. I like to see the best bodies on stage, and I think that he's one of those guys who will be a top 5 Classic Physique competitor.
Hey, nothing wrong with being biased if you truly believe, man. Nothing wrong with it at all.
Yeah. But give this guy a look. This is the name I truly believe you're going to see making moves in bodybuilding, whether it's in Classic Physique or as he moves into the open division. Genetics are just unreal. Brian Jones. Remember the name.
Well, we've got 15 guys currently qualified in Classic Physique for the Olympia already. And it looks like the Tampa Pro will be the first show that you can then continue to qualify for this year's Olympia. And then the last qualifying weekend is October 17th, which will be the Chicago Pro. So you've got that run of shows in between to finish out the lineup to add to the list of 15 that are currently qualified. Man, I honestly think we are going to see the most competitive 5 months of bodybuilding that the sport has ever seen.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Everyone's just frothing at the bit to get in there.
You better be Yosemite Sam. You better come out Yosemite Sam, man. Guns blazing. Is this the Wild
What's your
Wild
first
West?
show? Are you doing any shows in that time, or are you already qualified?
Okay. No, I'm not qualified. I don't want to mess the name up. Is it Wasatch? Is it Wasatch? It
So
used to be
Salt Lake City. Yeah.
Salt Lake City from last year. Yeah, they switched the name of it. So that's
Nice.
what I got up. So
Gotcha.
I'm feeling good for it. And I feel that excitement that he's talking about, because listen, man, it's like a kid, you inside and you want to go outside for recess. So that's how everybody wants to go outside.
George, your audio is cutting in and out, George.
Oh.
Your audio.
I'm ready to run.
He's ready to run. I cannot wait. We will be at the Tampa Pro that first weekend of August, and Maximum Muscle Report will try to be at as many of the shows over that 5-month period as we can to bring you guys full in-depth coverage of every single thing we can. We also have another huge surprise for you guys. You'll have to wait, but there will be another show starting Sunday night after the Tampa Pro, and every Sunday night after that. I think it's something you guys all been waiting for. We'll give you more information as it gets closer. George, take us out.
I don't know if y'all can hear me. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
New Kings Court right here. Great discussion again, man, with my guests. Thanks for having you guys. Andrew, Berry, Sid, Mandus. I think we covered it. You guys take the information and use it to your advantage. Like I said, this is the New Kings Court for Maximum Muscle Report. I am your host, George Brown. I'll see you guys next time. Long live.
The King.